Good afternoon and welcome to the latest session for the 2020 Family Business Summit. This afternoon, I'm delighted to be joined by a friend of mine and also a colleague of Family Business United all the way down under in Perth, John Broons. So John, let's start off with, can you just introduce who you are to the audience and your journey to where we are today, really?
John Broons. I live in Perth in Western Australia in a nice place where we had 30 degrees today. I'm bragging about the temperature. Nice and warm. I grew up in a family business, was third generation. My grandfather started a business, it grew and grew, and he built it into a public company. It was listed on the Australian Stock Exchange. He passed away. My father and uncle became the majority shareholders. They stayed majority shareholders for a number of years. They decided to sell out, and my father and uncle went in different directions. The parts of the business that were no longer required by the purchaser of that public company, my father took on parts of it, and so he continued in business in similar parts of that industry of timber and construction. So I grew up in a timber and construction business. So third generation. My dad passed away when I was 27, and being the youngest of four children, my oldest sister became managing director of the business as my mother owned everything. That kept going for a few years, and we had a recession. 5 families living off a business really gets to be a challenge. Cash flow tightens up, families get to start to struggle, and tensions rise. Something had to give. I put a proposal to buy the business from the family, which was accepted. This is a very short story, and ended up buying the business from the family, which absolutely changed the dynamics of the family for the better, and subsequently sold the business some years later. I got involved with family business consulting just after that time. Some friends that were also in family businesses wanted to know how I did it, how I remained friends with my siblings, and that was a wonderful outcome for me. I'm still friendly with them, and I still have lots of communication with them. At the same time, I got involved with the Family Firm Institute, started doing some of their courses, and I got involved with something called Family Business Australia, which was an organisation, a non-for-profit, which exists today in Australia, supporting families in business. So I facilitate forum groups for Family Business Australia. I run some of their courses. I'm running a succession course for them at the present time. And I'm enjoying my work consulting to families in business.
That's fantastic. So a really diverse background in terms of family business consulting, but also the family business experience. So you've without being rude, you've been around the block a bit, so you've seen quite a few different things. I think what I wanted to focus on with you today really was there are lots of things that are not talked about in the family business domain in the way that possibly they should be talked about. And we talked this morning in a session around health and well-being and mental health and well-being, which is a massive topic in its own right, where the pandemic has grown into even more of a beast. One of the side throws from that conversation this morning was how people move into other ways to find stress relievers, maybe turning to a glass of wine every evening becomes a glass of wine every evening on a regular basis. And addiction, I think, is a topic that's almost like a taboo topic in family firms. So it'd be really interesting to get your thoughts on what addiction means in the context of family business. So what's your kind of experience in terms of that topic, John? I know that's the theme for today. So addiction and family business, they don't necessarily go hand in hand, do they, in terms of something that's shouted about?
It's not a common point of conversation with families who are in business. It does rear its head more often than not. Gambling addiction is one that can cause problems. Alcohol, drugs, they all can be around inside a family business. The older generation really, in a lot of cases, has no idea what the younger generation are getting up to. The alcohol addiction and the gambling addictions are easily spotted, but absenteeism can be a highlight that something is not right in the family's business, in the family members, and even staff. In my experience, I've had a few interactions with families where addiction has been prevalent. And one case, the family and the business went into total destruction and does not exist anymore. The business and the family are not together. Divorce and complete breakdown. Another addiction event with gambling and drugs. There was an intervention created. There was a lot of support for the family that was called in, and there's been a lot of work done since. I'm still in touch with that particular family. It's not perfectly resolved. These things are part of mental health. Addiction is a disease in itself. So you are always working with the family. And so long as the family holds together, is always looking on the bright side and knowing that the future will be difficult to support the other family member. You can not so much overcome the addiction, but you can work with it and support those family members that are in trouble.
It's obviously a very difficult conversation to have as a family. You said it's easier. You can see that you spot the signs, and it's easy to spot the signs. What are the signs that maybe there's a family member out there that's working in a family but that hasn't recognised those signs? What are the things to look out for?
Absenteeism is an obvious one. Mm-hmm. Somebody that's trying to avoid being seen at particular points in time, oftentimes disappearing to bathroom breaks or not available when meetings are set, they don't turn up. Alcohol is something that you can pick up on the breath. Some people tend to avoid being seen. They try and come in exits that normally people wouldn't frequent. They don't come in the front door. Mm. And sometimes it doesn't even show up at work. It shows up more in the private lives, where they may not go straight home. There may be time lapses in between leaving the office and arriving at home. They might have been down to the bedding room or gone for a smoke or something like that. So it's not that easy to pick up. People that have picked up these addictions are generally quite good at concealing them.
And that must put enormous pressure on a family. So if you kind of take mother and father and they've got a number of kids, in your experience, have you found it when the issue comes to light? Is it something that everybody's known about but just not talked about, like an elephant in the room? It's been accepted almost by the family, or was it a complete shock to everyone concerned? And then what are the ramifications in terms of those relationships?
From my own experience, shock is generally the first thing that hits when the family finds out about it. In one instance, the one particular family was looking at refinancing. Somebody was looking through the accounts of the business to prepare loan application documentation. That person found some irregularities and approached one of the family members, who called me. He didn't call the police. He could have. He didn't call the rest of the family. He said, "I know John, I know you, I know you've got connections. What can you do to help us?" Mm-hmm. So in that instance, it was a very unusual case where I had to make a choice. And I chose to go with it, but I made sure that I created an intervention within 24 hours, and I had support organised for all of the family members. I did preparation for those family members that were surprised, and it was a surprise to the person that was intervened with. There are situations, though, that another example is a gentleman that came, had been working for a public company, was terminated from that employment, working geographically a long way from home. Came back, Dad said, "Oh, we'll come back and work in the business. You can help us out for a while." Hadn't been in the business for more than a few months, and was invited into a meeting. Couldn't keep his composure, stormed from the room, and within 24 hours, they'd been doing drug testing on employees, and they found that his computer had drugs all over the keyboard. So that was the issue for them. And again, surprise, because apparently that was the reason that he'd been terminated from his previous employment, but it had not been talked about. And mum and dad were trying to do the right thing by looking after their son.
And I guess that's the difficult bit to understand, isn't it? In terms of they're trying to do the right thing, and it comes to light that something is actually not what they thought, and that must be incredibly hard to manage, both for them individually as parents, but also for you as a consultant going in trying to manage that situation in terms of the different generations, but the different aspirations and desires to succeed in terms of the family, what the family wants to do, and kind of put big hugs around people and make it better, but also making sure the business has got what the business needs in order to function and survive.
Well, you're playing with trust and honesty, and it's so hard for parents who want to trust their children.
Yeah.
If the children aren't honest, then and they don't know that, they're leaving themselves wide open. So how do they find out? Keeping in touch with kids that are at a distance, or younger generation people, I think is part of it. But trying to keep a track of it when it's inside the business, it does open up huge risks for the business. This financial issue that was inside this other business was a large financial issue. The family and the business were strong enough to withstand that issue and overcome it. But there are some businesses, some families that probably may not be able to when it comes down to gambling and large amounts of money. Mm-hmm. The challenge of keeping it, in a lot of cases, families don't want to reveal it to wider groups outside of the family. And from an advisor's point of view, keeping confidentiality and yet talking about it on something like this, is I'm being very careful with my language. I'm fortunate that I have a great network here in Perth. There are a number of organisations that I'm connected to that have counselling, that have psychologists available through the Family Business Australia. I know of a number of very competent family business focused psychologists I can talk to, both from the client's point of view, but also from my side of things. There are times where I need to debrief myself after a bit of a confrontation, and sometimes issues can be heated, and I try to hide my bias or keep my bias out of the conversations. So yeah, I've got to keep myself in check as well.
It must be an incredibly difficult thing to do as an advisor, because in order for them to call you initially, you've obviously broken through that trusted advisor barrier to be someone they trust and respect and are happy to put the call out to. But then you kind of almost you almost have to take on a bigger issue that can be, for an individual, quite overwhelming. And for me, it goes back to that whole thing, is that you're not always there as an advisor to offer solutions, are you? You play to your strengths, you do what you do, but you have to have that support network that's broader and wider of experts when you need to call in those expert networks as well, to actually help you with the situation that maybe is outside of your remit in terms of doing. But that's quite a hard role to play when you know all of the individuals within that situation in the family to actually play that role.
It is difficult. And it's interesting because when I'm working with a larger group, mum and dad, 3 or 4 kids, 3 or 4 in-laws to the kids, somebody might get hurt in all of this. And although 70, 80, 90, 95% of them will still remain connected and see the value and the trust and the openness that I work with, somebody might walk away thinking that I'm the worst person in the world, and I have to accept that. So I understand that it's not a perfect world. I'm doing the best that I can do. My client is the most important thing, my client being the whole family and the business. So I'm trying to get the best outcome for them. And sometimes those individuals that are having some difficulty, they need to work on themselves as well. Hence psychology, psychologists and counsellors to support them.
Yeah, I think that's a very valid comment too, John. And a question that's come in actually from one of the audience is, we talk about the next generation and an addiction in the next generation cohort rather than the upper level or below. And the questions come in saying, thinking about the next generation where they're not already involved in the business, do you think this is an issue that's potentially associated with wealth and too much money, maybe too much time, that pushes them down a path that actually otherwise they may not have taken?
It depends on the addiction. You'll find that if it's an alcohol addiction, it could be multi-generational. It could go back to great-great-great-granddad. They're just used to getting the child to go to get the beer for them every afternoon, watching the football or something like that. And it's so habit-forming that the young ones just automatically fall into it. When it comes to gambling, it can be the mates, it can be the horses, it can be cards, it can be casinos. There's so many ways. Even the internet today is a hook. So gambling revenue, I just saw an article yesterday or the day before saying how much the internet gambling has gone up since we've been locked down in COVID here in Australia. So I think there is something to say about the wealth. The more affluent, then there's obviously more money to be spent, and drugs permeate a lot of areas of our society today. So I'm sure that there is an opportunity for it. Keeping great communication lines between parents and children, not just trying to be their friend, but also be a parent, is really important. So, you've got to be able to have the conversations about right and wrong and what your values are as parents, and see if your next generation are trying to follow your values, and talk about values over the dinner table. Don't talk about business, talk about values, talk about the culture that you've got around you and what it means to you and what you hope that it means to them, and have conversations about other cultures and other businesses and other people that they see and associate with, and what they believe is right and wrong, and try to understand it. I
think parenting is actually, it's something that's been alluded to over here for quite a while in some of the content and some of the articles that I've read as well, actually, in terms of it's not about just doing the right thing or trying to do the right thing. It's about being honest with who you are as a parent and actually making sure the next generation understand the same core values and ethos and everything else. And storytelling can help, can't it, in terms of the stories over the dinner table around the generations and grandfather did or whatever happened in the past, and trying to create that nuance. But I guess society is such, and the world is such in the way that we live today, that actually addictive behavior is going to be something that's going to be prevalent, and it's going to be present in families that are in business together. So what would be kind of your if you were sitting down with a room full of parents today that are with good business, what would be your advice to them in terms of how they can try and mitigate any potential addictive behavior patterns or trends going forward? What could they do now with the younger generation to try and stop that happening?
Conversation is one. Asking them ask the children questions. If you're telling children, they won't learn. If you ask children, they then can become interested enough to find out the answers, or at least try and find solutions. And you can help them find the solutions. And by helping them find the solutions, you can actually give them alternatives to, instead of going down to the pub and having a few drinks with the mates, that happens every night. Maybe you take it every second or third or once a week or twice a week or something, and put some limitations on it. But asking your children, giving them great role models, so modeling yourself what you think is right, makes a big difference to the younger generation.
And then hopefully they'll turn out and they won't fall down into the wrong path. They'll follow the right path rather than the wrong path, into whatever they want, maybe not in the business itself, but actually into a role outside, and then maybe come back down the line and come back into the business. But
I remember in a family business book I read, it must be at least 15 or 20 years ago now, and I can't recall the book, but it broke children into, or the younger generation into, say, 3 different categories. The 0 to 8 category. And it said something like, you know, this is the time that mum and dad have where the children see you as the knowers of all wisdom. You are the greatest. 0 to 8, doesn't matter gender, 0 to 8, you're the one.
Yeah.
From 8 to 16, kids have been at school for a while. The teachers know more than mum and dad. They've worked this out. So at school, they're learning from their teachers, and they know that they're even possibly in some things a little bit smarter than their parents, especially when it comes to maths, because maths has changed so dramatically over the years. But then from 16 to 24, the mates, their friends, those people that they associate with become the most connected education platform. My mates know the best. My mates know it all. My mates have had all of the experience. Nobody knows it just like my mates do. So once they hit 25, 26, 27, they're pretty much made. So you really have this wonderful window of 0 to 8 where you can talk to them and get them to understand your really strong values. From 8 to 16, that's when I suggest asking them things, getting them to learn to inquire more about how you do things the way you do and why. And then from that 16 to 24, 25 and beyond, that's when you need to be your parent and be really strong about what's right and what's wrong, and give really clear answers and model what you believe life is all about.
Well, sound advice, I think, definitely sound advice. With a 13-year-old at present, you can see the change in just learning skills and life learning skills that's changed as they go through. So I guess any parent can see that with their children. But yeah, good. I guess good to ask questions, good to listen. What can society in general, in terms of the family business community, what can we do to make the topics around addiction and well-being more, and mental health and well-being, which are kind of interrelated, more on the agenda, so that people are aware of it, looking for risks, and just appraising the situation so that it's not a taboo topic? What can we do to bring that more into the public domain?
I don't have an answer for you just off the top of my head.
It's a big question.
I know that it's a huge question. COVID is bringing mental health very much to the fore here in Australia. We're talking about mental health more and more at work, all the way through corporate enterprises, small businesses, even in government. Lots of challenge. The pressures that are on are unbelievable. So mental health and well-being, people are talking about stress much more often. Many more people are calling psychologists. So there is much more of an awareness. So I think there's press, the press, whether it's internet, whether it's television, it's certainly being talked about a lot more. So the more we talk about it, the more the opportunity is for other people to see the reality and see the necessity. So use the social media, use any media that can get these topics brought more to the surface. Because addiction in any way, shape or form needs people, needs families to support those individuals that are afflicted. And once you've got something like this, you really need some strong support to pull you out. Once you are addicted, you're deep in, and it's just challenges, not just for the individual, but for everybody.
And it has such a huge impact, doesn't it, on the individual, but the family, the business, the broader community, and everyone else. So I think it is good that it's making it more onto the media agenda, but I think there's probably a lot more that we can do to support families. And it's through people like you that go in and sit down with a family and try and mitigate some of those challenges and risks and understand it. I think that's where we start to see some of the traction. And I don't think Australia's it's not unusual just to say it's in Australia. I think it's prevalent all over the world.
Oftentimes I go into speak with potential clients, and I look around the business, I look around their offices, and you know, there's always smiling faces, but there's always one or two that aren't in happy places. And you wonder what it is, whether it's just a momentary lapse for that particular individual, whether it's something that's a bigger issue, whether they even want to be where they are. You can pick it up. A person that walks into a business generally picks up a feel very, very quickly.
Yeah. And I guess the outsider, that's a great message, really, isn't it? In terms of listening to those non-exec directors or those people that come in and just do a spot check on the atmosphere, the psychology of what's going on around a room, and just sensing things that are going on. It's often very difficult. I mean, you'll know this more than me, but the business owners will often say, look, we don't have time to focus on the business, we're too in the business. And actually, if they're too in the business, they can't see some of the things that are actually right under their noses in terms of some of those people and relationship issues. So it's good to seek external input at some stage.
I see this family business, in a lot of cases, it's a maze. You might take a left turn or a right turn, and you really don't know how deep you're going to go before you have to take a turn, and whether you go into a dead end and you have to double back. And learn a new way or a new approach. So I'm continually learning in this. My experiences have taught me a lot, but I'm talking to people all the time to try and understand a little bit more.
I think that's right. I think that's probably right on every level, isn't it? In terms of the whole family business consulting piece, in terms of there's no one unique style of family. Everyone's got a slightly different cultural nuance, or different number of members, or different in-laws, and different cultures that affect them. But also every business is different, and then you're never quite sure what you're going to walk into when you walk into. So you can't go in. It's not a process where that they want a succession plan and that's the outcome, and you know straight away that the outcome is the outcome. There are so many different variables and people variables that must make it really rewarding, but also potentially incredibly frustrating because it takes time.
It's a journey. I'm on my journey. The family are on their journey. Each individual in that family is on their journey, their own little journey. And it's incredibly satisfying when you're able to see young people step up, get enthusiastic, or you walk in and the passion is just so heavy in the air, and the parents, they're trying to let go, but they don't know how, in some cases. And, sometimes there are families in business that will have family members that really don't have the capacity to lead, or they don't have the desire, they don't have the skills, but they're there because it's a family business, and this is what we do for family. That's another part of it. I've just been blessed by the opportunities to work with families. It's been very satisfying for me.
But there are lots of people, I guess there are lots and lots of people. There are lots of people around the world that are like you, where they've come from a family business background. And this is a way of giving something back and using the experience that you've learned over the years to help other families that may be going through challenges that you've seen before. So what are the skills? I mean, if you take the addiction topic with an individual, what sort of skills make an advisor suitable to be able to have those really difficult conversations and manage people through a process that actually may not be solvable? That addiction may need to be a bit like the pandemic at the moment with no vaccine. We have to learn to live with what's going on around us at the moment. And it's probably the same in a way, to a certain extent, with an addiction. What skills do you think someone like you need in order to be able to help a family deal with that bigger challenge?
The biggest skill is to listen. Mm-hmm. You have to be able to listen and hear what the individual is saying to you, and be clear on what it is that they're saying, because too many times our biases get in the way, and we're already asking the next question before that person's finished telling their story. And being able to empathise and understand, and sometimes feel, but also have sufficient questioning capacity to be able to go to the next question. You have to be aware of the time and place. Sometimes places can hold deep memories for individuals. So the place that you're doing the interview, having the conversation, can be important to that family member. So there's an awareness of place, there's awareness of self, and the skills that I've picked up over the years, I'm not sure how much I picked up or how much is just naturally me. When I talk to other people that are consultants, that are business consultants, when I say I'm going to work with a family about their business, they say, why are you doing that? I can't put a label to that skill, Paul. I'd love to be able to, but I've just ended up doing what I've done because I'm passionate about families in business, and I think families are what we need to keep holding together. That's critical to me, a family way of life, mum, dad and the kids, from my parents down to me, to my kids, and hopefully all from there.
Well, you're clearly very good at what you do, and you have a very nice, unique, empathetic style, which is probably why they selected you as Australian's Family Business Advisor of the Year back in 2019. So an accolade that doesn't come without achievement along the way. So you've been on a fantastic journey. It's a topic that we can probably talk about all day, but actually I think it's just really important at the moment that we actually start to talk about the elephants in the room and the taboo topics that will help families that have got bigger problems that may be hidden under the carpet or maybe even not known about come to the fore. And I'm sure there are lots of families out there that have got challenges that they may know about and haven't dealt with, or they don't know about yet, but actually just talking about the topics such as addiction must be a good step forward.
The thing that I have found about addiction is it is totally non-discriminatory. It'll pick anyone of any age. It will pick anyone of a gender. There is no barrier to an addiction. If it wants to get you and you open the door to it just the slightest way, you can be got really quickly. So I agree with you 100%. We need to be talking about addiction more, and we need more people to understand how to work with addiction within family businesses. It's not every family business facilitator that understands how to work with it. And I've only learnt through experience and gut feel. It's not something that I was naturally trained in. I'm not a medico, but every day is a new day.
Well, John, it's been a pleasure talking to you today. I'd love to continue the conversation, and to be fair, I'd love to be continuing the conversation over a beer in the sun in Australia, because it's currently raining and grey here in the UK. As always, it's a pleasure to talk to you, and I look forward to catching up with you again and again, giving more time to a topic such as this, which I think is really important. So, John, thank you for your time today. It's been fantastic.
Thanks very much, Paul. I've really enjoyed it. You take care.
And you're a star. Thank you.